Welcome to our webinar MOVE2SaaS at Cosmo Consult. We would like to talk about technical aspects. This is why I just invited a colleague of mine, Tobias. Introduce yourself in a few words.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I'm Tobias Fenster. I'm the CTO, Chief Technical Officer of the Cosmo Consult Group, and I have the responsibility to take care of everything that's technology, infrastructure, and as such also cloud infrastructure and cloud technology.
Many thanks. I'd like to introduce myself as well. My name is Daniel Schmid. I'm responsible for the portfolio, so I'm the Chief Portfolio Officer at Cosmo Consult. As already mentioned, we would like to give you some insights in technical aspects. So starting with the differentiation between public and private cloud. Tobias, how can I differentiate between those two?
Yeah, we need to take a look a bit in the past to understand how that happened. When cloud technology first came around and we talked about automating stuff, having self-service capabilities, having automated scaling, hyperscaling, and that kind of things, it happened that the companies typically were a bit reluctant to move into a cloud environment, but also already understood that it makes sense to have that kind of automation, that kind of self-service in their environments. So what they tried to do was kind of replicate that kind of technology, that structure into their own data center. So what happened to be a private cloud typically was my own data center as a company, but being driven by cloud architecture, by cloud technology. So that in the past typically was a private cloud. That kind of changed in the past couple of years when service providers as well as vendors like Microsoft started to do things like carving out a part of a cloud infrastructure dedicated for one company. And in the meantime, you find some that are referring to a private cloud when they are talking about that kind of an environment, while you still see people who are talking about the old environment type when they're talking about private cloud. What always was more or less well defined was the idea of a public cloud that always was infrastructure that is provided by a cloud provider like Microsoft. So they are taking care of the physical infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, the software, the platforms, everything that you need to provide a service. So that is why in the public cloud, we typically are talking about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. But today we're going to focus on software as a service because that means that you have an environment where the cloud provider is taking care of everything. You as a company, you as a user only say, I want this type of a service, I want this kind of software to implement in my company, in my enterprise, and the rest is automatically taken care of for you. So you only need to be aware of things like permissions, the functional setup, configuring things so that they work like you need them in your company to work along your processes. But the whole technical infrastructure is taken care of for you. You only are using the software as it is. And that's what's typically meant when you're talking about software as a service, which brings the most benefits for a company because they can focus on their own processes, on their own business benefits, and all the technical stuff is taken care of for them.
Many thanks for the first clear definition. If I would be in the audience right now, I definitely would ask myself, why now? Where is the critical moment? Why there is a need to do it now? Mm-hmm.
That basically has two aspects, at least in my opinion. The first one is that we're seeing, driven by the corona pandemic, that you can't encapsulate your environment anymore. You can't keep it isolated from the outside. That was a typical argument a couple of years ago where companies, enterprises said, I want to have my environment non-connected to the internet. I have my critical systems, my critical core of my business, and the IT systems that are driving that are not available from the outside for security reasons. But now we are seeing that almost everyone who can is moving remotely, is working from the home office or from anywhere. So you have the requirement that you need to allow people to access your critical systems from the outside. And that means that you need to open up those connectivities. You need to open up for external access, also maybe for partners, for service providers to access your systems, to interact with those systems. And that means that you need to understand how that works. You need to secure those access types and make sure that everything works. And if you're opening that up, if you're opening up your on-prem systems, then it only is the logical next step to take it one step further and move into the cloud, into a SaaS environment with your complete offerings or with your complete systems. And the other part is that we're seeing that the adoption of that kind of technology and also the availability and the readiness of the software providers in a SaaS environment have dramatically increased. While previously in the starting days of cloud, it was typically things like a dev and a test environment, maybe trying this, trying that, analyzing data, but not really the core processes. And we've seen a lot more advancement in those areas where companies are really starting to put their business critical, their company critical data and also their company critical processes into the cloud and let them be driven there. For the same reason that I've talked about before, that also the offerings are more ready, are more stable, provide more features than they used to in the past. And this is true for cloud providers like Microsoft, but also for us as Cosmo Consult, where we've also done more for the readiness of our solutions in a SaaS environment.
So many thanks explaining and tell us a little bit about the now. What about threats? Are they always from the outside or is there also something from inside?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I just recently saw an analysis study that talked about that companies are somewhere in the range of 40 to 50% of companies have had some security issues, security threats, security incidents in the past. So this is no longer an isolated problem of a select few, but this really is a mass problem where a lot of companies have faced this. And as you mentioned, it's not always the threats from the outside. Of course, that is also something that's very important because those threats are changing a lot, evolving a lot. There's a new threat vector that comes up basically every day. You really have to take care of your strategy on that side as well to be sure that you always have an idea how to answer to that kind of threats. But we also have the internal threats. That's also a very interesting thing to talk about or to think about when you're talking about cloud security. Because if you do it the old way, then you're very protected against external threats, really shutting off external access or having a difference there. But if you're moving into a cloud environment, then you're also protecting your data, your processes against internal threats, because it's always the same level of security. It's always the same level of threat awareness and of fending off threats, even for internal threats. So when we've seen before that maybe an internal invader or someone who wants to do bad things from internally had an easier time, if you're moving into a cloud environment, then it's a lot more difficult also for the internal people to do anything that would harm your processes and your data.
Many thanks for that, Tobias. You've mentioned data centers. So tell us a little bit more about how can I understand a Microsoft data center? What's in?
Yeah, actually, it's not that different from what you're seeing in a typical data center in your enterprise or in your company. But certainly it's on a different scale. So it's a lot bigger and it really is top-notch professionalism, top-notch technology that is being used. So starting from the physical infrastructure, where we're typically talking about digital firewalls in the cloud world, we're also talking about physical firewalls in the Microsoft environments or in the Microsoft data centers. So if indeed the problem happens that a fire breaks out in some part of the data center, they can have a firewall, a physical firewall in between, so that maybe another part of the data center can keep on running. So you really have resilient, highly available infrastructure that also keeps running if the baddest thing happens, if the worst thing happens, and you still are resilient and can keep on going. The other thing is the scale. So there's just a lot of infrastructure. If you have the chance to at any time visit one of those data centers, it's really very impressive. There can be physical visits, but Microsoft is also doing virtual tours around their data centers and having a look there and understanding the sheer vastness of those environments. That's really very, very impressive. Microsoft is also investing a lot into sustainability, making sure that really the environments are CO2 neutral in the meantime, adding to sustainable ways to provide that compute power, that storage power, to make sure that it's also environmentally safe to keep your data in those kind of environments. So that's a huge focus point of Microsoft in the last couple of years. And the last part, and that's maybe even the most important as always, is the people who work there, because you really have literally hundreds and thousands of people who are doing nothing else than taking care of site reliability engineering. Those are people who do nothing else but making sure that the systems keep on running, they are safe, they are sound, the data is safe, they keep on having the same performance that they had before. So it's really the specialists that work there. And it's not only the specialists there, but they also, of course, have access to the people who literally created the software in the Microsoft environment. Now, I need to be very clear here. The people who are creating the software and the people who are running the data centers are absolutely strictly separated. The people who are creating the software have no way to access in any shape or form the environments in a data center. That's very important from a data security standpoint, so you're sure you don't have any data leaks in that area. But still, if they have a problem in an Azure data center, and it's a problem that is caused by Windows Server, that is caused by SQL Server, that is caused by Active Directory, then they have direct access to the people who are actually creating the software. So if they are running into a problem, they can take literally the people who created it and help them with solving the problem, creating a fix or whatever. And that is something that even if you're a large enterprise, you wouldn't have that kind of access. And certainly if you're an SMB customer, there's no way that you would have that kind of access on the Microsoft side.
So in other words, the best out of two worlds in a Microsoft data center. You just strived security. Let's give us a little bit more insights about security. What are your perspective? What is the mid-sized company expecting from security topics or issues they faced in the past? Not only because of data center or how it is designed and how it is operated, but more from a company-driven approach. How can I face security topics in terms of SaaS? We are talking about MOVE2SaaS.
Yeah. What we're seeing oftentimes, it's a very limited amount of people, a very small team that is taking care of the security of my on-prem data center. That's just because A, it's very expensive, B, it's difficult to get those kind of people, and C, it's just very complicated. You need to be really good to be on top of your game when it's in regards to security. So the big difference here is really that you have a large team that is doing nothing else, taking daily care of security business, making sure that everything is safe, you're protected against all kind of threats, and you really have the specialists who are taking nothing else, doing nothing else. And that is really something, if you're, especially as you're saying, a small to mid-sized business, but also an enterprise, that you need to ask yourself the question, is your data still safe if you're talking on-prem? Do you really have the kind of security analysis, of threat protection, of mitigation plan, if anything happens, that you can have in the cloud? Or, to be honest, do you literally have no chance at all to be on the same level as Microsoft is, because it's just so much threats, it's so much complexity that you need to handle. So if you really want to be on the safe side, then you need to move to the cloud. That certainly is something that has changed in the last couple of years. But nowadays, if a mid-sized business is telling me they are perfectly safe with their on-prem environment, I would, at least put a big question mark behind that statement.
So we talked about security. What about scalability? Your perspective on that?
Yeah. That's basically where cloud comes from, or that's what most often talked about in a cloud environment, the flexibility, the scalability to meet any demand. And what you're typically seeing is that you have companies that have certain peaks. Either they know in advance, every month, in the middle of the month I have a peak, or Easter and Christmas are the big peaks because I'm big in commerce or whatever. Those kind of peaks that I need to handle in an on-prem world, or are very difficult to handle in an on-prem world. It's very clear that I either have to do a peak sizing. That means that I have to plan in advance what kind of can be the worst case on performance demands. So I have literally to size my systems for that peak. I have huge systems, and for a lot of the time during the year, those systems are idling or only to a marginal percentage used. Or I can try to do something where I kind of meet in the middle. I have not too many resources for a lot of the time over the year, but then the question is, can I meet the demands of those peaks? Or does it, and that certainly is the worst case for any IT responsible person, I have a huge load. I could sell a lot of my product. I could run a lot of, let's say, shopping carts in my online shop. But unfortunately, the resources are not there. So my system is crashing and the customer is going somewhere else. That is, of course, the worst case. And in a cloud environment with its almost unlimited resources, I can do things to proactively scale the system. So if I already know at this point of time I have a peak, I can do the scaling, I can make sure that the resources are there. Or, and that's maybe even more interesting, I can do on-demand scaling. So if I can see that I get a lot of requests, I need more resources, I can automatically size the system or scale the systems up so I have the resources that I need. In a SaaS offering, that is typically something that is taken care of for me by the provider, but at the same time, they need the same kind of flexibility. They need the same kind of scalability. So even if it's not my problem, at the end of the day, I still need it. I don't want to pay a lot during the year. I also want to have those peak resources, and it's good to know that in a SaaS and a cloud environment, those resources are there. The other part of that equation is that I also need to scale back. So that is also very interesting to think about especially from a money perspective, but also from a technical perspective. If I don't need those resources anymore, I can easily scale down. And that is true both from the technical infrastructure standpoint, but also from a people standpoint, from a license standpoint. So imagine you're adding a different company, or you're adding a different country, a different region into your portfolio as a company. That means that you bring on a lot of new users, but you can simply do that by buying licenses. It's nothing more. You just need to add additional licenses, and then you can grow as far as you need to go. No need for new systems, no need for upgrades, no need for scaling your on-prem infrastructure. You just buy the license and you're up and running.
You mentioned something pretty important. No need for updates or upgrades. In this term, there is a new topic, a trendy topic, commonly used with SaaS is one version. Your perspective, some insights about that to explain how does it affect a company which moved to SaaS in terms of upgrades, and what does one version really means?
Yeah, that is something where companies have been critical about. The idea of being always on a new version means that you always get the latest release. So maybe every month you get security fixes, every quarter, every half year, or at least every year, you get a new functional release, you get new features. And what customers are typically thinking about are the huge upgrade projects of the past, where it really was a huge effort across the whole company. The IT department had to do a lot, reinstall servers, upgrade to new versions, do new configurations. The functional people needed to take care of a lot of upgrades, need to understand how new features work, do new configuration, and so on. But actually, the opposite is true. Because you are constantly updating, constantly upgrading your software, you have a lot smaller steps that you need to take. So if there is a new feature that is coming up in a SaaS environment, I might even be able to participate in a preview to get it even earlier. But even if I'm waiting for the general availability, then it's only a small step that I'm taking. So the big upgrade process of the project of the past that was very stressful, took a lot of effort, kind of blocked my whole company for a period of time. That is the thing of a past, because I always have those little steps that take me forward. And the other part of the equation is that if you think about new functionality, you read or you heard about a new feature and you think, oh, that's very nice, that would save me half an hour per day because I don't need to do it that complicated. It can be automated. It can integrate artificial intelligence, whatever I have in the cloud. That is something that also gets a lot easier, because typically what happened in the past, I would talk to my consultant, I would talk to someone who's in the know. Can I do that? Can I do this? I've seen or heard this for a new feature. And then oftentimes the answer was, unfortunately, that's not available in your version. We just need to do an upgrade before we get there. And if you're in that kind of one version environment that you describe, and you're always on the latest version, you can immediately take up those features, use them, and be sure that you take the most out of them.
So in my words, being present, being up to date, working on one version is also kind of being innovative. How does innovation attract new employees in a topic of SaaS?
Yeah, as you say, you have the aspect of new employees. If you're talking about new people that you want to bring in, because maybe for age reasons or whatever reason you're losing people and you need to restaff your team, then it can be very complicated if you're still on-prem, if you're working on old environments. The people who want to connect cables and want to set up server racks, those are very few in the meantime. So that's one problem, but the other problem also is if you want to attract the best people who nowadays typically have more than one offering, and they're seeing the one company that is still working on-prem, old school, I need to wait for a couple of years for the new features to arrive and work with them. And on the other hand side, I have a very innovative company, also innovative on the technology side, newest features, latest upgrades, everything on top of their game, then I think the decision is very clear. They're going to move for the innovative company. And the other part that is very interesting in that area is that if you look back like 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years, then the IT, the technology department oftentimes was a driver of innovation because they brought in new things. They were able to present new ways to work. In the meantime, it unfortunately oftentimes happens that the IT team didn't grow at the same rate as the complexity grew, because we have a lot more complexity these days. And that means that the IT team maybe has their hands completely full with working against the security threats and keeping everything more or less on the same level without losing anything, and only doing the very necessary steps to move forward, but they no longer can drive innovation. So that's also a big chance, a big opportunity for the IT teams. If they are moving into a SaaS world, it's not a threat for their jobs, because that's what we're sometimes seeing. They are afraid that they would lose kind of their work, but actually it's a big chance to move forward, to be that innovation driver again, and to move forward on the business side. And it's not only about the developers, about programmers who can move forward there, but with low-code, no-code platforms like the Power Platform, it's also that people who don't have that deep technology or that deep programming development knowledge who can start to be innovators, business drivers. So it really can be a big chance to move the IT team, move the technology team to the forefront of innovation again.
Many, many thanks, Tobias, for all your insights and these new perspectives on a technical level regarding SaaS, software as a service, and cloud. The last question I do have: how can I get in touch with Cosmo Consult? How can I benefit from all these insights? How can we help our clients?
There are typically three ways. The first one is a more general cloud aspect. So if you're wondering as a company, what is it that this Azure Cloud can do for me? What's in there? What are the services that I might be able to use? What would be good steps? Because typically it's not the big bang that brings me into the cloud, but actually steps that I can take. There we have a team that does vision workshops. So you get an idea of what the kind of offering is that the Azure Cloud offers for you and how you can move forward. That does an analysis, creates a step-by-step plan, how you can move maybe the easy parts first, and then later move the more complicated parts, that kind of thing. The other thing that we are offering is ERP assessment workshops, and there the idea is to take a look at your ERP but also CRM systems that you currently have on-prem, and to get an idea of what you are actually doing, what are you still using, maybe it was implemented 5 years ago, are you still using that? Now that you maybe bring in a new version of the base technology, is it still needed, or can the standard already do that? And that kind of assessment workshop is also something that we're doing a lot, where we're helping customers to find the best way with their ERP and with their CRM solution to move forward into a cloud environment. And the third step is the third part is individual workshops, where we're taking a look at what the company currently has, maybe a specific problem, a specific thing where they are looking for help, and think that maybe the cloud can be a helpful solution, where we work together to find out where cloud offering can be the best idea. And that, to address you as a viewer now directly, is something that I would like to ask you to do. Please get in touch with us. Take a look at our landing page. You will find the links here to find out what we have as content, webinars, white papers, information that you can see there. Also the contact persons that you can directly get in touch with to benefit from the kind of offering that we just explained. And then we would be very happy as Cosmo Consult to help you with your move into the cloud, with your move into a SaaS environment.
So I would like to close up with one of our slogans: keep calm, move to the cloud. Tobias, many, many thanks.
Thanks a lot.